Welcome back to Ethics. For this week, we will discuss the divine command theory. Now, I understand that other people or other students here may not be of the Catholic faith or the Christian faith, but let's look at this in a general sense. When they say God, or when this lesson says God, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is limited to the Christian definition of God. It can be the higher being that your religion is referring to, or any higher being that you believe in. But for the sake of the divine command theory, let's look at it in the Christian version of God. Now, according to the divine command theory, what makes something morally right is that God commands it, and what makes something morally wrong is that God forbids it. Now, this claims that whatever God permits or commands and prohibits or forbids is what makes the certain action right or wrong. Nothing more, nothing less. The sources of the knowledge of the divine command theory is really rooted in religion. So that's why the Holy Scriptures is one of its main sources. Anything written down in the Holy Book is considered the source. You can hear or you might have encountered or witnessed instances where people cite the Bible or the Quran or any other holy book to justify any of their actions. Next is the voice of conscience. God speaks to us through the tiny little voice within each person, which is our conscience. So, some would say that our innate sense of right or wrong, or the little voice in our head that says that this action is right or this action is wrong, is actually God speaking through us. So, that can be considered a source of the knowledge for the divine command theory. Last are the religious authorities. So, these are the religious leaders. They are considered God's instruments to make known to the people on earth what kind of life the higher being wants his people to lead. Now, these religious authorities are also here on earth according to the scriptures or according to the religion for guidance. And because of that, since they are considered the authorities when it comes to our organized religion, it is through them that we know what the command of God is. Upon entering this subject or upon starting this lesson, one might already have innate criticisms or comments about this basis for morality. And that criticism has existed for decades. One of the first criticism that we will look at is from Plato himself. Plato's criticism is dubbed the argument or the logic, whatever it is called, but the name itself is Euthyphro, wherein it questions, is something right because God commands it, or is it right, which is why God commands it? This train of thought wonders if God Himself has any reason for calling certain actions right or wrong. Does God Himself have a basis of right or wrong? Does God Himself know that there is a right and a wrong? Thus, does that mean the concept of right and wrong exists separately and God knows it? Or God just decides that this is right and this is wrong, and from that comes out the concept of right and wrong? This argument suggests that goodness is independent from God, that ethics is separate and distinct from God and religion. And you can see that validation, that existence of that argument in real life, especially with religious plurality. We can still say that one is good even if one does not have a religion or does not believe in God. In the same manner, you can say that one's religion does not dictate that they are good or bad. There is a moral atheist and there is an immoral, let's say, Catholic. So one of the other criticism is religious pluralism. It raises the question, which religion truly expresses God's will? Christianity isn't the only religion in the world, and the divine command theory is heavily rooted on Christianity, which was and is still one of the major religions of the world. If God's law is the only correct and valid norm of morality, how can we really determine it in the midst of religious plurality, wherein each religion has their own standard of what is good or bad? Now, you might see that argument around online wherein people say that it um you are restricted by your religion. Do not restrict me because of your religion. You have seen that argument. And it does raise, or rather, it is related with the argument of religious pluralism. The third one is the problem of interpretation by religious authorities. This criticism acknowledges that the religious authorities, while having a status of being the mouthpiece of God, such as like prophets and everything else, it has to acknowledge that human beings have their own shortcomings and limitations. Remember that human beings are imperfect. We are prone to mistakes, we are prone to sin. And because of that, it would be unwise to take everything the religious authorities say or command in regard to their interpretation of what God commands. We have seen instances of this criticism come into play, even in modern day interpretations. There are conflicts of interpretation that have arisen in the Vatican in regards to certain religious scriptures, and even in the local scope, you might have seen different priests or bishops reinterpret or reinterpret the same verse differently. So that does raise the question, if they are supposed to be a mouthpiece of God, why can't they be consistent about it? Next is the fallibility of conscience. I truly thought with myself that I ought to do many things contrary to the name of Jesus of Nazareth. If conscience is one of the sources for the divine command in regards to our morality, we have to acknowledge that we ourselves cannot decide between right or wrong by simple preference or simple reference rather of your own conviction. Sometimes in when a situation pushes us to a certain limit, what can be right or wrong can be skewed, especially depending on one's situation, one's context, one's pre-existing environment. One's conscience is not a full justification of your conduct. It also raises the question, what truly governs your conscience? Is it the will of God or is it the will of man? Last is that not everyone believes in God. It's related to the first one, not first one, the second one about religious plurality, wherein there are many people who are moral and do not believe in the existence of God. Central to the belief that morality is grounded on divine will is the assumption that there really is a God. Because even if we say that there is a God with our own faith, according to our own faith rather, there are still people who are atheists. They do not believe in a higher being. But even then, those who are atheists, they still manage to live good lives doing moral actions. They do not appeal to any divine authority as a basis of their conduct. So the existence of people who are moral and do not believe in the existence of God undermines the claim that we can only be good if we follow God's will. And that is all for the lesson for today in regards to the divine command theory. If you have any questions or clarifications, feel free to contact me. You can message me via Teams, or if it's a formal issue, a formal request, you can send me an email through Outlook. That is all. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Goodbye.